email? What does it mean?
Communication is the imparting or exchanging of information or news.
The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Conversation is the oral exchange of sentiments, observations, opinions, or ideas.
Forbes Books Radio presents The Conversation with Clinton M. Padgett.
I'm joined today by Chad Severson, who is the CEO of Ergotron, a leading global company in designing ergonomic solutions that connect people and technology to enhance human performance, health, and happiness. Chad is a senior executive with proven strategic marketing, operational, and general management experience. With extensive experience spanning 5 different industries, Chad is known for his team-based leadership with creative and competitive instincts that have driven results to the next level. Chad, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Clint. Great to be here and look forward to a great conversation.
Awesome. I like to start off by asking my guests to share more about themselves, or as I like to say, what's your backstory, as we say in the comic book in the world, and their leadership journey. So I'll turn it over to you to tell us a little bit more about your background and the path that brought you to your current role as CEO of Ergotron.
Sure. I'll start at the very beginning, which was I grew up in northern Wisconsin and had a pretty good idea that I wanted to see the world. And like a lot of folks, military was an option. And so I joined, actually went to the Air Force Academy. To me, what was really appealing about that was making my own way. So not having to go into debt or to kind of burden my parents. And so that was what got me launched, I guess, into the world. Spent some time in the Air Force at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and spent some time with developing, weapon systems, basically in project management. But then took the opportunity to get into private industry. So I launched my career with a division of Emerson Electric. And subsequently spent 23 years there. Did a bit of a hiatus with the Kohler Company, which is an incredible company. And I'd say the last 15 of my years at Emerson, I was leading different divisions, and that's what gave me the variety of industries that you referred to. And so I was a real privilege to see business from that many perspectives. And then when the opportunity came to look at Ergotron, I jumped. It was a chance, frankly, to get to a business that I could see had great bones, had an incredible history. But at the same time was having some difficulties, and I knew there was a brighter future for it. So in the renovation world, that's a house with good bones, and I saw that as an opportunity, and joined about 3.5 years ago, and really haven't looked back since. So it's I think been a great ride.
And what would you say has been the most surprising thing about your journey so far?
I don't know that there's one thing, Clint, but to me, one thing that's becoming clearer and clearer as I spend time in leadership, especially in the dynamic environment that we participate in today, and that is, I don't think there's one leader with all the answers. And I think a lot of people like myself read a lot of leadership books and look for the answers and continue to hone our skills, which we totally need to do. I mean, but I think, for the younger leaders out there that think that they need to have all the answers, I think the message I would give them is there's no one with all the right answers. What there are I think are opportunities to continue to learn, to continue to build teams, and collaborate so that you have perspectives from a number of places. But I'd say that's what's crystallizing in my mind. In this environment, no one person can do it all, and what you really need is as a collaborative team, and keep learning, because the world changes in a pretty rapid way.
No doubt. I'm glad you brought that up. I have a couple of collaboration questions coming up later on, but the vision at Ergotron is to be the world leader in improving how people work, learn, play, and care for others. I know you've only been with the company for around 3.5 years or so, but in what ways have you seen this vision change lives for the better?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, to me, that's what one of the things that really attracted me about Ergotron was, if you go back to our history, when this company was formed by a very charismatic founder named Harry Sweary, and one of the first things he found was, and he was an airline executive actually here at Minneapolis, St. Paul, and saw ticket agents kind of crouched over their monitors And from that very first day, he said, there's got to be a better way. And oh, by the way, the backstory there is he had a brother that was a chiropractor. And so they knew the importance of proper positioning. And so that's how this company began, literally in his basement and his garage, and just building products that helped the interaction between humans and technology. And so it's probably not one thing, but I think it's many. It's really that purpose that drives us, that says, we can make it better. And everything from our monitor arms to the carts that we build for nurses. Just an interesting story about nurses. We've done a lot of research about how to make their lives, better, frankly, from a ergonomics perspective. And we've heard all the stories about overwork and long shifts, and especially heightened by COVID. In some of the studies that we found, they're spending something like 30,000 steps on these extended shifts. And 30,000 steps is just an incredible amount. As someone who walks and tries to hit 10,000, I mean, holy smokes, 30,000 steps. And so if we can make it a little easier on them, if we can make that cart a little more ergonomic, if we can make that input of patient data a little simpler, that's what we want to do. And so to me, it's a very powerful purpose, and it affects many of the products, well, all of the products that drives us. And I think that's what makes us unique is when you change from a conversation about, what's the price of that to how do we help you and your employees be healthier? It's just it's a different level of conversation. And I think that's why our sales force quickly turns from selling to being trusted advisors and saying, how do we really help you all be more healthy? That's certainly a greater goal, and frankly, something that gets us all up in the morning.
Right. So did his brother get mad at him for taking business away by having these better devices?
No, I don't think so. I never heard that interchange, but that's an interesting aspect. Yeah.
My brother's a chiropractor, so I know that's how he would think. But so what are some of the major trends or innovations in technology that you forecast having the biggest impact on movement and overall wellness in the future? Yeah.
So, I would just point to what we've experienced with the pandemic. The way we are working is different, and I got to tell you, Clint, it's really been interesting to be part of this organization, our focus being on ergonomics and the way people work. And then to be here over the last, 3 years as this has unfolded, and kind of see before, then see during, and now seeing hopefully some of the after, or what the after could look like. And what I would tell you is we have people all around the world. We're doing this in I think about 80 countries that we're selling to, and we have people on multiple continents, and we're all connected, as we all are today with all the different virtual tools that we have. And I could see this all around the world kind of evolve with our own people, and that is different way of working. So what was 5 days a week in the office to in many cases, fully remote, or a hybrid where there's some time being spent in the office and then out. And so that's what I would point to in terms of a trend. And frankly, I think there's things that we experienced in the pandemic that we won't change back. And I would say hybrid work at a certain level will be one of those. And, I know there's a lot of controversy around that, in terms of remote and, coming to the office. And I don't know that we have a news cycle that goes by without somebody saying something on that topic. But what I would tell you from my experience is I think there's going to be a good chunk of the population that has the capability to work hybrid because it is so effective. I mean, you reduce commute times, you give flexibility to young parents, you at the same time achieve record results like we have. And so it just adds up to a different way of working. And so what that means to us at Ergotron is instead of building out a business to business, type model, we need to be flexible and really meet the end user where they want to buy. And so that could mean someone who's working from home that would like to buy equipment there, or that could well mean, the traditional business to business type model that we've grown up with, so to speak. But really that whole change in how work is done, to me, it's really kind of exciting. I say, in some cases, we'll look back at this in 10 years, 20 years and say, we were there when, There's definitely a transformation happening, and it's really exciting to be at the center of that.
Yeah, you came on at the perfect time, I believe.
Yes, yeah, I did. I'm very, very fortunate.
So speaking about this hybrid environment we live in, I want to talk more about some communication skills and how they translate to leadership. In a recent interview, you shared that this, in quotes, two-way communication is one of the keys to your company's success, especially having made that shift to a hybrid work model. Can you expand on what this means to you and how you cultivate workplace culture around this mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I would tell you again, I'm just a student of trying to get better and listening, and I think that approach served us well in the pandemic. And so what I would tell you is, when we went from in March of 20 to working 5 days a week in the office to now we've got just about everybody working from home, it became very, very clear that communication would be really important. And so we went to basically weekly messages, short videos that I would do, and keep people apprised of what was going on, because frankly we thought, well, this is only going to be a couple of weeks, right? So let's keep people informed, and then we'll get back to business and move on. And then weeks went to months, and months went to years, and so on. But I think it's that whole communication, because now from the interaction you can have in a centralized office to then dispersed and working in literally hundreds of offices around the world, we just really needed to make sure we were communicating and listening to our people. And so that was a lesson that was taught to us very well. I'll give you a quick example on what that means in practice. So as we started to think about returning to the office, frankly, we got into some space concerns because we're growing, which is a great problem. So we kind of did a couple of things. We said, instead of trying to solve this as kind of a tops-down type approach, why don't we just ask our people what they would like to do? Because it's a conversation, and I know, as simple as that sounds, a lot of people don't start that way, right? And so we talked to people who didn't have a lot of connections, in terms of requirements for collaboration, so they weren't working on a project jointly or that type of thing, but did more heads down analytical kind of work, and said, see, we're open to it if you're interested in being remote. And so there's a percentage of our office population that we've offered remote. They've accepted that. They want to do that. Clearly, there are times when they would like to come into the office, and we've got some hot desking opportunities so that there's some places for them to land, so to speak. But that opened up more collaboration space. So here we took a problem that was, hey, we're running out of space and we're going to actually have to make cubes smaller, which is not very attractive, right? How do I sign up for that? To, hey, now we have more open collaborative space. We have some hot desking where you can land if you need to come in for a project, and just, I think, a much better solution just by having a conversation. So to me, that's the lesson that I've learned and relearned in this pandemic, and as we come out of it. And so that's something we're going to keep. We're just going to turn up that two-way communication to make to land at more robust answers.
I think that's, to me, two-way communication is really the key. This podcast actually opens with a quote from George Bernard Shaw that says, "The single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place." And yes, I think that really comes to bear when you have one-way communication. You may send a message that it's quite clear to you, but it may be received in a completely different way to the recipient of that message. So I think it's always good to have that instantaneous feedback of not maybe asking the question this way, but did you understand what I said, right? You want to get that feedback, and that comes best through two-way communication, which I'm a huge fan of.
Absolutely. And the other part of that is intent, right? Because you can think that you are just communicating something that's pretty straightforward, and it comes off with a very different intent. And so another reason to keep checking in and ensure that that alignment is there.
Well, I think we all played the game as kids called telephone, where you get a bunch of kids in a row and your first kid whispers a secret and goes down the line. And of course, the fun of the game is that what comes out at the end is not remotely close to what was said in the beginning. Yes. And you see that in the business world as well, when you fall in these gaps where you just send messages, to your point, that message gets received through a filter, right? How is my day going? Am I in a bad mood, a good mood? I mean, how many times have I received an email and the person maybe had no malcontent, but I was in a bad mood and took it the wrong way, right? So, and all those things can be alleviated if you have the two-way communication. So I'm a really big fan of that. One of the questions that I do have around this, though, is, I read in one of the articles you talked about having a barbecue and, during a lull in the pandemic and inviting people, including some new employees. And it got me to thinking, so for those new employees that came on board during the pandemic when everything was remote, how are you able to provide mentorship and a sense of the company's culture? Because for me, those are kind of things that happen observationally. If I'm in the office and the person hangs up the phone and I see that reaction they have, are they happy that they had that conversation? Are they muttering under their breath? I mean, to me, that company culture and figuring out who my mentor is going to be kind of happens almost through osmosis if I'm in the environment with you. How are you able to change that when you're remote?
Yeah. And see, I'll use this as an example of what I started off with, which is, anyone, a leader, doesn't have all the answers. And if they do, I really wonder, right? But what I can tell you is some things that we're working on, and we're going to keep checking in and see if we can't get better. So a couple of things. One, the barbecue idea. Any time we can get events. For example, we're celebrating our 40th anniversary, which is kind of a cool thing, and
that's awesome.
We're celebrating across the year with these really cool kind of slideshows and films of what the first decade was like, the second decade, and it's just a great culture builder, right? You just remind everybody, hey, this thing really started by our founders care for making people making their lives more healthy, and so just kind of centering us back on that at that beginning. So events like that are very, very important. We do, and this is another thing we learned in the pandemic. Onboarding is so critical, and we happen to have a really talented HR group led by an L&D leader in this particular area. And by the time folks come out of onboarding, our NPS scores, net promoter scores, and would you recommend kind of thing are off the charts. And so that's really, really important. And there is a portion of time that we ask people to be in the office for that interaction, and we ask their managers to be with them. And so we do have some guidelines or guardrails for new employees. But the other thing too is just to check in. Like I said, in terms of how are we communicating things. We do a heck of a lot in the way of employee resource groups. So diversity, equity, and inclusion. And getting people involved or engaged in that, other things that are worthy goals that will kind of unite us. Another program that we have is internships, and so actually bringing in interns, and there we ask for again a little bit more of close contact to kind of mentor that culture, that type of thing. So I don't pretend we have it all figured out, but I can tell you that. And this is something that I'm very proud that the team was able to pull off, is we have pulsed our employee base every year for the last 3 years. Every year for the last 3 years, including in the pandemic, our employee engagement scores have gone up. And to me, that says we've got more right than maybe wrong. There's always room for improvement. But that's kind of the approach that we're taking. But you raise a great concern, and I think that's something that we just have to keep our eye on as we go forward, is how do we create those opportunities to build on that? Because I grew up in the cubicle world, and I learned a heck of a lot by what I overheard from the sales leader just over the cube, and especially around how to handle difficult conversations and things like that. And I wouldn't trade that experience. And so that's something that we might be missing out on right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's one of the keys for me was, like you said, learning about the people around me, how they reacted, what they said, or what the conversation was. And you do lose that when it's fully remote. And with a hybrid, hopefully we'll be able to bridge that gap. When it's fully remote and Zoom is off, you're kind of in a vacuum. So
Right.
In one article I read, you mentioned that leaders need to adopt a future-oriented mindset. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, I just and I think it kind of reverts to the initial comment I made. It just lifelong learning, and the world is changing at a really rapid pace, and so that kind of future-based mindset or growth mindset is another term that I like to use is is going to put us in a good stead. The other thing I would say that really is helpful for leaders is to have a curiosity. To have a curiosity about your work, because I think it leads and opens many, many doors that otherwise you might not even notice. And so you take that in combination, that curiosity with what might the future hold? What might this workspace look like in 10 years? What might the medical wing look like in 10 years? And that's a pretty energizing place to live. And I think it's that balance between taking care of today's business and spending just enough time thinking about those things in the future that really creates a nice mix for people in terms of seeing the satisfaction of accomplishment in kind of today's world, but kind of the energizing view of the future and how you might shape it. So it's really a balance, but that's what I've certainly have found in my own personal life to be really, really energizing.
In another article, you discussed 13 leaders' tips for tackling competing priorities. And when I teach project management classes, I always ask the attendees how many of the projects currently on your plate are considered top priority, which they always laugh and shout back all of them. And
Yes.
my response is, so really none of them are top priority because they're all the same priority.
Yes.
So I know we could probably spend half an hour on this topic alone, but what are some suggestions you have on how we can overcome this everything is top priority bias?
Yeah, that is a great question. And again, if we had all those answers, I think I'd be writing some more books and lecturing, right? But what I can tell you is again, a little bit of the history here, and maybe that gives you a little context, or it gives the listener a little bit more context. But we had a situation where, again, great history of the company. Just incredible innovation over time. Sit-stand desks that were kind of the inventor of the sit-stand and getting people more healthy, and some incredible technology on monitor arms and medical carts and things like that. However, there was a period of time where, frankly, focus was lost. And so there was a lot of work being done in different areas and really not that kind of true north. And you could see that. And so I think that was something that the longer term employees really could identify with. And so as we've come forward and said, hey, let's really verticalize this business and focus on what each of the verticals need, that allowed that focus. And I think just that absence of focus and then bringing in, here's our strategy specifically for healthcare, let's say, and what we're going to do about that and what we need to do. And the other part of it is, I'm sure is you have to say no. A great quote from Steve Jobs that I recall, at least paraphrasing here, that every day they were killing good ideas to work on the great ones, and that's tough. But that's the kind of thing that has to happen. And if we were perfect at it, they wouldn't need us. The reality is we still have too many priorities, and we're working it down. But I think it's that whole continuous improvement approach that kind of takes off that pressure. You don't have to have a locked in answer on this. You just have a commitment of people that want to get better and get better every day, a little bit every day. And so that, 15 priorities gets down to 10, gets down to 8, gets down to 5, gets down to 3. And now I think we're talking.
I think as human beings, we don't like to say no. We want to say yes to everything.
Yes.
Somebody that I interviewed last year brought it up in the podcast and said, you have to think of it this way. It's not that I'm saying no to this. I'm saying yes to something else. And I can't say yes to both. And so I think if we think about that, I'm not really saying no to this. I'm just saying yes to something that's higher value.
Yeah, that's a great observation.
I saw a video where you described converting a meeting room to allow for social distancing while still enabling face-to-face collaboration. We were just kind of talking about this. I know your company embraces the hybrid format, but yet you still believe some things are best done face-to-face, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a great example of learning, right? Where we said, wow, we want to collaborate more. I talked about how we were a little bit space constrained, and then, just by some creative thinking and getting, in connection with our people, and we're able to establish that population that's remote, and that kind of opened up some collaboration space. So just imagine, an area that was once literally a cube farm, all the walls taken down, And we have these products called mobile desks that are basically just an adjustable desk, so height adjustable desk on wheels, so you can kind of take it anywhere. And actually, the product was invented for the classroom. It was invented for students, but guess what? If it's good for students, it's probably good for adults too, right?
Right.
So we said this could really work because at that time anyway in the pandemic it was this requirement to be about 6 feet apart, and so how is it that we could get together because there's just really not a table long enough and at least be able to do what we want to do. But yet these mobile desks allow you to configure however. So, literally for a 3-person meeting, you could grab 3 and get together, or for a 13-person meeting, you could grab the 13 and move around this larger area. And so that was a great way to kind of balance the need for that spacing, but also the flexibility of a workspace that you needed to configure. But getting to your specific question, yeah, there's no substitute, right? Especially and I found it among our staff. Our staff meetings, as much as possible, are in person. And I just think, at the senior leadership level, in general, the stuff we're dealing with are pretty tough issues. There are things that the organization really can't handle easily, and there are trade-offs to be made. And frankly, when there are trade-offs to be made, it's really good to have opposing viewpoints and have that discussion and put it on the table. And frankly, as you pointed out, body language makes a big difference. And so it's that kind of approach that I think is serving us well to be able to kind of balance those hybrid meetings. And by the way, it's the same way we do our projects. As I'm sure it sounds like you have a background in project management, it's a full contact sport. And the reality is when you're making trade-offs between product managers and engineering decisions and what can we do for the customer and meet that minimum criteria, at least for launch, that is best in person as well. And that's what we subscribe to. So we set up these collaboration spaces for project teams and our staff groups that they can come in, meet in person, and then kind of go about their day.
That's awesome. I totally agree with you on all those points. So obviously in the past few years, you've had some challenges you've had to overcome. And I was wondering, what are some of the problem solving strategies you guys have implemented as a team? And what did you learn as a business leader by doing so?
Yeah. So, one of I think the things that I'm most proud of the team on is how we adapted. So just to give you an idea, I mentioned, we had a long history, 40-year company, primarily through the IT channel, primarily through B2B, business to business. And so here comes the pandemic. There's no one in the businesses ordering the products that we were selling, at least on the office and workspace side of our business. And so that's a problem. But at the same time, we could see we really had a kind of a minimum level website up. We could see all this interest in our product. And so just by getting the team together, kind of taking a look at the data. So I would say that the principles are involvement, engagement, data analytics, taking a look at what data was being available on our website. We found out pretty quickly there was a lot of interest, and it was coming from residential locations in our products. So to give you an idea, before the pandemic, roughly 80% of our products were shipped to business locations. And fairly quickly after the, let's say April timeframe of 2020, it was about 80-20 the other way. Products were being shipped to residential locations. So got the team together. They observed this and said, hey, what are some potential solutions? And came up with a couple approaches. And the 2 approaches that we followed were building up our own Amazon store. Because whether or not you shop on Amazon, we are probably all guilty of it, right? We do product research on Amazon. And so it's just a search platform that you need to be on. And then we did the same thing with our own website. And at that time, it was actually hosted at a third party. We pulled that in, added e-commerce capability, all inside of about a 12-month period. And I'm happy to say we're able to meet the customer wherever they want to buy now. And had we not taken that collaborative, data focused, and by the way, I got to give the team incredible execution. And here the discipline really came out on minimum viable product. Let's just understand what's most important, because as you're building something, you can add a lot of features and benefits and frankly spend a lot of time. And we needed to turn things around pretty quickly. And so we kept it tight, and just can't compliment the team enough there. Another side aspect of that is taking some employees who had some experience in e-commerce, but really hadn't been trained on the latest tools and techniques, putting them through the latest training, which frankly became a lot more available in the pandemic online, and really developing people along the way. So literally building the plane as we flew it, kind of thing.
Right. I think one of the things that I've learned recently that was surprising for me is I think Google's still the number one search engine, but following closely are YouTube and Amazon, which I never would have thought of as a search engine, but I'm guilty. I want to know how to put a desk together. I go to YouTube and search. I mean, it just makes sense. I just never would have thought about those as search engines.
It's evolving quickly, isn't it?
It is. And there's no substitute for being able to see the video as opposed to just reading the instructions. That I'm sure yours are well written, but some companies are not very well written.
No, we rely on the videos too. It's universal, right?
And I say that as an engineer. I'm an electrical engineer, so maybe writing skills are not my forte. So I get it. What would you say is your leadership communication style?
So probably, hopefully, it's come out by now, and that is it's collaborative, data focused, data oriented, results driven, and just I'd say two-way communication. So I'll give you some examples. I think that's maybe the best way to illustrate it. So big believer in one-on-ones. And that is every week, every one of my directs and I sit down for 30 minutes. And the first 15 minutes are theirs to talk about, honestly, whatever's on their mind. And in some cases, it's business related, as is, life goes on, and sometimes it's not business related, that things that you need to talk through. And then the second 15 are usually mine. So I try to catch up on whatever, questions I might have about their particular area. And I just think that keeps us aligned. And I just a big believer in that, and actually ask all of our leaders to do that with their people. And I think that's one of the keys to the engagement is to just make sure we're reaching out and staying really close to our people, because in this environment, things change quickly. And as you pointed out, in remote situations, you can feel really isolated. And that kind of gets to the mental health aspect, which is so important. And that's a way that we've found to be pretty effective. And so you take that at a very individual level. And then the other thing that we've adapted is setting out a monthly meeting with leaders. So these are all of the managers of people. And so we first talk to them about anything that we're going to announce in the organization. So we say, basically give them a slide deck in advance, talk through it, and say, now we're going to cover this with the entire employee population. And I found that small change has made a big difference, because now, if you think about it, you're empowering your managers. You are actually giving them the information first. You're giving them the opportunity to shape the message. You're giving them kind of setting them up for success. And so that would be an example, as well as how we kind of roll that through the organization. And I've found that we've just built this camaraderie in doing that, an alignment that frankly I think is stronger than when we entered the pandemic.
No, I think it's great. One-on-ones I think are fantastic. So I'm if you haven't adopted those, you need to, right? That's really key. Otherwise, you think your message is clear, but it may not be.
Exactly.
What advice do you have to share with fellow executives, directors, or team leaders who are responsible for managing the execution of complex projects?
I'm just probably going to sound a little repetitive, but it's all about the people. I sincerely believe that. We have a saying here, which is, if we take care of our people, they'll take care of our customers. The financials will follow. And sometimes that's a bit cliche, but it's so true. Another example is I've led organizations that have manufactured and have big manufacturing plants. And so what I found on that manufacturing floor is, when you're able to show that manufacturing employee that you're more concerned about their safety than the profit for that month, that opens a lot of doors in terms of communication and trust. And I would say the equivalent for that is, and by the way, we do that to our best of our ability. And again, we never want to rest because you got to keep working it. But I'd say the equivalent for that in this time of pandemic and remote work is mental health. And when you can demonstrate to your employees that you're more concerned about their mental health and welfare than, the profit for that month or whatever, I think you gain a lot of credibility. So the first thing is always employees. And then when you start talking about a complex project, I think, to your point on communication, let's set the North Star. What does good look like? What does the end, starting with the end in mind? And when you say a particular thing, I always found it fascinating working in groups that, if you step away from that meeting and say, well, what did you hear? And what did you hear? And what did you hear? And it's just a very different version of that North Star. And so to the extent possible, kind of getting that in writing, getting everyone to buy in and contribute to that explanation in writing just saves so much time. So we found this in project work time and time again, which is go slow to go fast. If you spend that time up front, really defining that problem, what are we trying to solve, and aligning on that, then kind of step back and get out of the way.
I think you said so many things that I really appreciate, especially the last one was about the documentation part. You're right. If you just verbalize things, everybody has their own take on it. But when you put it on paper and then people have to agree to it, it's a whole different level of engagement that comes into play. And you mentioned something about being a cliche. To me, a cliche is if you have a vision or a mission statement that you paint on the wall, but everybody walks by and going, that's just for show. But right. When you actually care about the people on the shop floor, and I remember reading an article where the guy said, I want to say it was GE, and they were interviewing these people on the shop floor, and a guy raised his hand. He said, you pay for our hands. You can have our hearts and heads for free, but you got to ask for it, right? You're just not going to give it for nothing. So what you were suggesting is by showing that you care more about the people than the profits. I mean, we all know it's a balance, right? You can't have no profits forever or there'll be no people around. But as long as you can show that, people are going to give you their all. Yeah.
So I would say earlier in my career, I kind of understood that on the shop floor. And I think I'm learning the equivalence for that, throughout the entire organization. And I would say today's example is mental health.
I think if we go back and look back in the old days when it was mostly face-to-face in the office, 9 to 5, butts in seats, and then we went 100% remote for a while, and now we're going back to hybrid. If there's anything good that comes out of it, I really hope it's this mentality that people realize, and if you think back, if I was a remote, I felt like everybody in the office was thinking I wasn't working, I wasn't pulling my own weight, I wasn't valued. When we called in for conference calls, I was always the person asked last because the people in the room dominated the conversation. Well, what do you think, Clint? At the very end, well, I don't know. All the good ideas have been used up. I don't have anything now. So yeah. I think hopefully people realize that you can be valuable remotely. And then I think some of the things we can do as organizations is when we are hybrid and we do have those Zoom calls or those meetings where a lot of people are face to face, but there's a few that are calling in, maybe start some of those off with asking the people on the phone their opinion first to give them a chance to feel valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm sure our experience is indicative of a lot of companies, which is in the metros, Minneapolis, St. Paul area where our headquarters are, there's a lot of traffic and people are commuting. And so in general, you could have, let's say an hour or two for commute time. And what we found in this remote work world is people are willing to give you a lot of that as the employer. They're like, I work from home. I'm going to spend more time working, and what a tremendous gift to the organization. So yeah, it's important to take note of that. And it really does challenge some paradigms. I have to admit, when it first began, I was in that old school of, well, where are all our employees? What are we going to do? And our results, and just example after example of kind of going the extra mile like that says, hey, take care of your people, and they'll take care of your customers, and the other stuff follows.
Exactly. Are there any leadership principles that speak to you personally and guide your day-to-day behaviors?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Peter Drucker, and to me, he got a lot right. And there's a couple of things that I would cite there, which would be, first, he said there were three, and I've read I think there's some recent work on this. I think it's McKinsey has done some research, and then they published a book on the responsibilities of CEO, and they've got a long list of them. But I really like Drucker for the standpoint of simplicity too, and so what he said was the CEO is responsible for first culture, second strategy, and then third results. And I try to, in fact, I've got that on my whiteboard right next to my desk so that it reminds me, what am I supposed to be working on? And I like the fact that it starts with culture, right? So all around that, people create the environment that you want to be known for, that you want your people to really experience. If you start your day that way, you generally end in a better place.
What is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
So I'm gonna go to my Drucker manual. Literally, Clint, I begin every one of our onboarding sessions with employees this way, which is to say, hey, you're going to get inundated here. You're already being inundated with data and drinking from a fire hose, so to speak. And then it's going to continue when you start learning your job content. But there's three things Peter Drucker said that you need to think about as an individual in an organization. And he said, number one, get focused on results. And it's more than just, pay attention to the results piece. It actually is, if you think about it, that new employee is going to ask their manager, hey, what exactly does good look like? What are the results you're asking me to drive? And there's an alignment that happens there. And I think that's really, really powerful. The second thing he said is, if you're a leader, develop your people. If you're an individual, and this is my modification of that, if you're an individual, develop yourself, because this world is changing so fast. You need to be always sharpening the saw. And so that is our other piece of advice. And if you think about the impact to people, if we're bringing in leaders in this organization that are developing people and reminding our leaders that that's one of their core responsibilities, again, builds a better place, someplace we'd be proud to work and have our family work. And then the final thing is, we have a set of core values that we live by, and we make decisions on them. And the very cool story about it is, in many ways, it personifies who we are as an organization. And so when I first joined, there's many of these things were in place, but they weren't codified. They weren't written down. And so what we did is we said, okay, let's take some best practice core values from a handful of really great organizations and put those in front of the employees. And so what we did is we just literally surveyed them and said, what speaks to you about Ergotron? And the core values that we have are what came back from our employee base. And so things like continuous improvement or being customer obsessed or integrity or openness all came from employees. Actually, there's one we added as a management team, and that was openness. And so the idea was, if we're going to do something here transformational, take good to great, then we need to be open in the process. But I think that's really, really powerful, which are those three things, which are focus on results, develop yourself or your people, and then live the core values. And you're going to be in pretty good stead.
Well, I think you've stolen the thunder from my last question, because I'm pretty sure you've answered it with the last two. But what is the best book or article you've read recently? What was the key takeaway?
Oh, I'll add to it. Okay. So I was gonna show you this one, which is James Clear, Atomic Habits. It's kind of a top of mind, top of shelf. And I just found that a lot of what we do at Ergotron is in that book. And simple things like be agile. Just get started. There's a lot to just getting started, because you learn and the world is changing very rapidly. And then, these small things that happen over time are really, really powerful. And so if, he talks about in the book, a 1% improvement, like that British cycling example that he gives. And then before you know it, they're winning the world championships. It's all about, just that commitment to get better. And who doesn't want to be around people that want to get better? And so there's just a lot kind of enveloped in that.
It's actually on my top shelf. I'm going to read it here soon, I hope. So,
oh, you'll enjoy it, I'm sure.
Chad, this has really been great. If listeners want to learn more about you or Ergotron, how can they do that?
Yeah, so www.ergotron.com. Welcome the folks to take a look at our products. we're very proud of them. I'm very proud of our approach as a company, and look forward to helping them become more healthy and productive. That's what we do.
And I learned a lot by reading some of the articles that you've written. So can they follow you on LinkedIn perhaps to find links to those articles?
Absolutely. Yes, thank you. Thank you for the reminder. Yeah, so I'm out on LinkedIn, and I do some work for Forbes Council with the help of a great team that we have here at Ergotron. And yeah, so that Chad Severson at LinkedIn.com as well.
Chad, thanks so much for the conversation.
Hey, thank you, Clint. Enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to The Conversation. To find out more about Clint, go to clintonmpaget.com and pick up Clint's book, How Teams Triumph, Managing by Commitment, at Amazon. The Conversation with Clinton M. Paget is a production of Forbes Books.